Yeah, films. We watched some films. So let's talk about those films. All right, so we are talking about Don't Look Up, which is on Netflix, like Kat said, and it is from 2021, brand new, and it is about two low-level astronomers must go on a giant media tour to warn mankind of an approaching comet that will destroy planet Earth, and it is directed by Adam McKay, and it's it's really interesting, the film, just like stepping outside of just the film itself, is like the reception of the film. So this film got a lot of, interestingly enough, got a lot of bad reviews from like critics and like people who think they know what regular people want or care about. She's throwing shade here already. And I find that hilarious because everyone I've talked to, or like people that I trust more than I would trust like some random critic, really enjoyed it and said amazing things about like what they felt watching it, because there's just like a frustration. And I think specifically with our generation and maybe lower, or like and younger, probably have similar like aggravation to the rest of America. So in the world, honestly. So I think we're going to interpret it and have this kind of connection to it that other generations just aren't going to have. And I think like those critics are just out of touch. And it's also not really surprising to me that there was this split review for this film, because I was thinking like similar to The Hunt, which we covered a while ago. That film was famous for being canceled before it even was out, before it premiered, and happened to be specifically about that cancel culture. And then there's also the summer murder game favorite, Squid Game, which also had like this weird, like people didn't get it. Right? Like people were like having real Squid Games or having parties and not understanding that this was a critique on like capitalism.
Yeah,
and,
it wasn't like a fun party game.
It's not
opportunity.
That. So when I see that there's like split reviews, I totally get it, because I'm not surprised that people miss the point. That happens, and that's why we exist, right? And I think this film sits happily in the family of films that calls out our culture's issues while also being ridiculed in real time for doing just that. Which means we really like it. So, I would say this is like one of Ghouls' favorite films. And it's, I mean, for people who are like, it's not horror, it is horrific. Like, the world is gonna be, like, is gonna explode. Everyone is going to die. This is an apocalypse scenario. You can't tell me this isn't horror.
Yeah,
like,
it's a little
funny,
less like glamorous than zombies, but it's still very upsetting in a very visceral way. And I mean, tying back to the journalism thing, like I think it also ties back to like what news sources are writing about this negatively and who owns them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And who benefits from people not watching it.
Yeah.
Which is its own world. Which is what I love about it. So it's like I think it's so interesting, this film. But yeah, I'd say it's definitely horror, in that I think people would find this really horrifying, and I think people would be afraid. So let's get into what happens in the story, and then I'll talk a little bit about why it fits into our category for eco horror, and then we'll send it over to Kat so you can be really afraid. So this film follows a graduate student named Kate DiBiasky, who's played by J-Law. Welcome back, babe. I missed you. So excited to have you back. I saw this interview with J-Law where she was saying like she left because she felt like just everyone was over her and like annoyed by her existence. And I was like, oh. I was like, I feel that. Like, I know that's why she thinks that, because she was like that person who was like, I'm down to earth and I'm like funny and cool. And like people were just not having that after a while. Like, it started out, she's really cool. Then it was like, never mind. And I was like, that's my whole brand. So I'm so glad she's back. I'm so glad she's returned, because now I'm like, redemption arc. So Kate DiBiasky, back to my point, discovers a comet, and it's a celebratory event until they realize it is coming straight for Earth. It is larger than a meteor that annihilated the dinosaurs, and it'll be arriving soon, like in 6 months soon. Very soon. And you learn this immediately, and you might think as a viewer, like, wow, what a weird way to begin this film. We already know that the Earth is in peril. but there's so much more to explore, because that's just like this jump off point of like, yes, for a fact, you should be afraid that the world is going to end. Now let's try to do something about it. And that's when the chaos happens. So these two astronomers, so it's the grad student and then their professor, Dr. Randall Mindy, played by Leo DiCaprio, phenomenally, did a great job. So, yeah. They do what any human who discovers such literally earth-shattering news would do. They bring it to the folks in charge. And for this film, it's a comical, though not entirely off base or impossible, right-wing parody mashup of like Trump, Biden, Hillary Clinton kind of person. Like, but she's very American. That's all I could. I was like, is she the president right now? Because that's what I feel like. So it's President Orlean, and they're played by Meryl Streep again, amazingly, and she's absurd and honest and just like, again, too real. And the astronomers are like, the whole beginning of the film, they're like struggling to figure out like how they're even gonna tell like the president like the world is gonna end. Like, how do you tell people the world is gonna end? So they're freaking out. Leo's like having panic attacks in the bathroom. Like, they are just not being able to handle that pressure. And then they bring it to the people in charge, and they're like, the world is going to end. And they are met with a PR prep meeting that requires them to reduce the 99.9% likely impact to roughly 70%, so to not instill a panic. And they're told to sit tight and assess. And again, we're in the middle of a pandemic that started much the same way. So when those in charge knew about the pandemic before it hit here, before it took so many lives that it did, and they kept it so that they wouldn't have the same thing. So it's absurd that it's like a meteor, and like I get that that's funny to be like, how absurd that they wouldn't take that seriously, but it's like they didn't take this seriously. I'm not surprised. There are a few moments in the film, like I'm not gonna like give a lot of this away because I want you to go watch it. But there are a few moments in the film where you feel a sense of like completion, of like hope. And you're like, maybe people aren't as bad as we think they are. And then of course, you come to your senses when we're given indisputable truth and they still do what they do. Right? Because capitalism rears its ugly head again and again in this film, over and over, as it does in many of our episodes. And I won't spoil the film, but I really want everyone to know that people are trash, always and forever. And that is like the theme of this film. And just know there's like all these ups and downs. There's a lot of absurdity, and I totally get like older generations being like, how dare you say that we're like this? But I'm like, you are, dog. There's also a concert featuring Ariana Grande singing a song asking people to like look up. It's an absurd song, but it's actually pretty catchy. But it's more like, wake up to what's going on around us. And when I was watching this scene, like, and I was watching this whole concert happening, I was like, okay, what we need is to connect Ariana with Greta Thunberg and make an awesome climate change concert to raise funds and awareness. I was like, that's the only way that we're going to get through to the masses, honestly. Like, make it really cool. Like, we've had so many, like, concerts with different singers and performers for different issues. Why not climate change?
Yeah, just like take all the energy that went towards the When We Were Young festival in Las Vegas and then just throw climate change in there. And all the millennials with all their existential dread will just be like, yeah.
Yeah. I'll be like, heck yeah. I love this. Let's fix it. Right. And I think the problem with it is that it is really absurd. So it's like, it's an over dramatization of what's really happening, but we should have the same sense of urgency. And I think that's like what people are missing. So there's so much that is really ridiculous about this film. But I never really felt like the reactions and how people were interacting were too absurd. Even some of the things that were really, really wild. Like, even when Jonah Hill, who plays, the president's son, who's also like the head of like I don't know, he's some kind of
secretary of something.
Secretary of State or something. And like, it's clear there's like nepotism there. And that is like a jab at the Trump presidency. Like, even that, I was like, okay, that's like, he's ridiculous and stupid, but we just had that. Like, even from the morning talk show, and like, I geeked out because I actually used to watch Live with Regis and Kelly like religiously in my early college years, and I don't know why. And I saw her like go through that change where she ended up like on her show now, because now it's Live with Kelly because Regis is gone. But even like to the celebrities and the obsession with what is trending and like how glued we are to social media and like what's hot and not wanting to wallow in that, I was like, that feels really weird, or like really genuine. And throughout the film, characters learn of the state of the world, like what the future is, and that it's going to end. And their immediate reactions are very honest. Like, they vomit or they panic. There's fear. There's like confusion. There's like the like doubt, or like all the stages of like grief they're going through, but then their coping mechanisms kick in, and you see as they're like grasping for straws, trying to find literally any excuse or explanation that does not point to the entire world dying in the span of an evening. And it was outrageous and entertaining, but it's also terrifying because it felt really honest to reality right now. Because like I said, we're coming fresh out of the Trump presidency, and I don't get surprised by the stupidity, the eager blindness, and the insane misinformation campaigns that we have. To me, that's just America. That's what it is, and that's what it's always been, right? So it's easy to compare the response within and outside of the film to our world's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I don't know if that's entirely what their direct like causality was, right? Like, to be like, this is about that. I think that just happens to be what happens as well. But I mean, how many news reporters, political figures, social media celebrities, and other important faces have severely impacted this pandemic with misinformation, suppression of life-saving information, and other insane ideologies? Like, we've seen it in action.
Yeah, it's just kind of like a trend, specifically like just to uphold the status quo and not delve into anything that's even vaguely inconvenient, because they don't want to instill panic, because panic stops work. There's this inherent need, the necessity for work is built upon the continuation of what is normal or status quo. And if that doesn't exist, like, if people are like no one's going to go to work for the next 6 months, and they don't want that, so
because they'd rather pretend it doesn't exist. And and money plays a really big part in it too. But it's also like, there's always the tactic, and we've talked about this on our show before, of like the apocalypse scenarios, and how I've said like 1984 has surveillance and everything, but Brave New World had like, we're gonna placate the masses with just enjoyment and hedonistic like love, right? So it's like, with this, that was exactly what it is. Like, instead of them panicking and instead of controlling them in this way that's like, listen to us, it was like, oh look, there's something fun happening over here. Like, did you hear about Ariana's character's breakup? And like, they just, or like even just seeing any of the news interactions, like how they would try to like swerve it, like, we don't want to get too like dark and sad on our show, like we like to keep it light and happy, it's a morning show. And it's like, the world is gonna end. Okay. And so I think that's like just representative of people in power trying to keep the masses in line, and the only way to do that is to not let them actually know that it is something to be afraid of, and to distract them. I felt really close to Lawrence's Kate DiBiasky throughout the film, in just like how her character just like doesn't ever hold it down. Like, she's never like keeping it quiet, and she gets in trouble, and that's a really funny part of the film too, is that she's always getting in trouble for like giving out too much information. But like, if I was in that position, I would be doing the same thing. I'd be like, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous that I can't tell everyone that we're going to die in 6 months. And she has like these cries for attention, for anyone to literally just acknowledge the severity of this situation. And it felt so much like Kat and me every week on this podcast. And Kate has a breakdown on TV, not Kat. Kate.
Yeah.
I feel like we are always close to one of those. Where she shouts, "You should stay up all night, every night, crying when we're all 100% for sure going to effing die." And I felt that in my soul, because I want to say I'm pretty sure that's what we're yelling like every week, is that we're 100% dying all the time, and no one is doing anything about it. And so I don't know what we're missing or what she's missing or why people aren't listening, but it felt like I was like, oh my God, is he like in our head? Does he know who we are? Director McKay, what are you doing? The other part of this thing is that the film isn't too far off with its science. And that is thanks in part to Director McKay's insisting they have an astrotech advisor named Amy Mainzer. And Mainzer is the principal investigator for NASA's NEOWISE, I won't spell it all out, NEOWISE mission, which is tasked with finding and categorizing near-Earth objects, the NEOs. That's like NEOWISE. To find out if they're here. So she knows what she's doing. So she worked on set and she even helped to write. And this film obviously isn't just about comets and astrology. It's more about climate change and our world's willful ignorance to the impending disaster. And it's like, no, a comet is not coming to kill off all life, but that doesn't mean it isn't also a danger, and that the Earth isn't already in danger, right? All these things that we hold dear and sadly take for granted are at risk as we continue in our destructive course. Like we've been saying this entire series, there are so many things that we do that are harming the environment that it's not happening in 6 months, but it is happening pretty soon. And that's what the creators are aiming for. They want you to feel the doom as if it is happening tomorrow, not hundreds or thousands of years from now. They want you to feel it like it's happening, right? They want you to feel like it's a comet coming out of space. And more important, I think this film is about science deniers specifically, not just, hey, climate change is real. It's people who are so adamant that it isn't and that science should be doubted. And whether that's climate change deniers, anti-vaxxers, or even those who actually don't believe in the horror of space, like the fact that space junk, meteors, debris, literally anything that's up there at any time can make its way to us and just incredibly alter life on Earth. That's real, but people don't believe it. People think the world is flat. So I like the whole thing is like, it's part climate change, it's part how stupid people are. And McKay has even said after an exclusive screening that he held for scientists, he said, "This film is for you, the scientists. We want you to know that some of us do hear you and do want to help fight science denialism." And I was like, dang. Dang, you got it. It's people really think, because there were like meteor deniers and the whole like the hat that says like don't look up, and it's like look up, it's literally right in the sky. That's what we're saying to like people, like look at the horizon, there you go, the Earth is round. And they're like, we're gonna buy equipment to prove that it's flat, and then they get disproven and they're like, it only made me believe harder. You're like, why? Flat earthers drive me crazy. It's wild. Now they're all QAnon, so you never win.
It's humanity is interesting at the end of the day. It also just like had a not climate related realization that hurt. Remember New Girl and the guy that Nick hangs around with that's a professor? I look like him. And it was upsetting for me. He wears scarves, and was a whole problem.
Sorry.
It's okay. I'll tell you about it later, and you'll be like, "Oh God."
I'm sorry you like that.
It's okay. It's okay.
I'd rather you. Let's just say you look like Leo. Okay.
Yeah, I'm like
he's America's heartthrob. Always has been. Always will be.
It's fine. It's fine. But yeah, no, it's the whole film is very stressful, and the sense of urgency is very valid. And I did not know we were not doing spoilers, so I think I probably had some spoilers in my section, but I'll try to not say them.
That was my choice. I was just like, I don't want to go through play-by-play of this film because I really want people to go in and appreciate it. So, I mean, like everyone knows there's meteor coming first. I think the biggest thing is like,
how it's handled.
The people who are obviously specific people in the world besides Trump, obviously, that flip it all over. What a crazy twist. Okay, I'm gonna pass it over to you.